What's up everyone, it's me Zombie. I hope you've had a spectacular week so far. This past weekend I decided to challenge myself by putting a costume together in one day. I made this medieval Game of Thrones-y costume for the Texas Renaissance Festival. Not only was it comfortable, but it was really easy to put together. One of my favorite parts of the costume was this cloak that I made. It goes on super easy. And it does this cool little crisscross thing in the front here. It ties together in the back. I bet a lot of you are noticing that it is very reminiscent of Jon Snow's cloak from Game of Thrones. And that's because I got a lot of inspiration from his cloak. After making this, I realized how easy and fun it was to make. I want to share how I made this so you guys can go out there and make something really cool of your own. So if you want to look as cool as Jon Snow and learn something new and fun, then keep on watching. First, I noticed the cloak consists of three main elements: the fur around the shoulders, the two crossing straps in the middle, and the longer cloak part. I found some leftover faux fur here in my fabric bin. If you don't have any faux fur just laying around, you can try recycling some faux fur clothing or purchase it by the yard at your local craft store. To create the pattern for the fur piece around the shoulders, I used some brown paper and folded a large piece of it in half. I sketched out a rough shape of how I wanted the top part of the cloak to look. I made sure to use the fold to my advantage to make sure that both sides were symmetrical. I cut out my pattern and put it over my shoulders to see if I liked the shape. I ended up changing it a bit and cutting it down at the front, and then I kept trying it on and adjusting it as needed. Once I got a nice shape, I transferred the pattern onto my faux fur. I made sure to trace it twice so I could have fur on both sides. If you don't want a double-sided furry top to your cloak, you can trace the pattern onto your fur once and then trace the other side onto another fabric of your choice. Now that I have my two furry sides, I flipped them inwards so the fur was facing each other. I used these little clips and clipped the two sides together to prepare it for sewing. If you don't have these clips, then you can use pins too. I just like these because I always accidentally stab myself with pins. I set my sewing machine to a heavy woven fabric setting and used a straight stitch to sew both sides together. If you don't have a sewing machine, you can easily whip stitch these edges by hand and get the same result. I left about a 3-inch opening behind the neck area. This leaves me plenty of room to turn my furry shoulder piece right side out. Then I sewed the hole shut. I tried on this part by itself to make sure it looked okay. So far, so good. I picked up a recycled belt from a local thrift shop for $3 to use as my crossing straps in the front. I cut them to size and made sure that each side was equal in length. I cut 2 slits in each front corner of my fur piece and then slipped my straps inside. I used a generous amount of hot glue to hold the straps in place. If you have contact cement, that would be an even better adhesive to use for this part. But if you don't, hot glue works just fine. I found some recycled curtains from my local thrift store, and I fell in love with this yellow color. Besides the color, I really liked how sturdy the material was. If you want to go for a more gritty Game of Thrones feel, you can pick up a darker or more neutral color. I loosely measured out how long I wanted my cloak to be. I decided I wanted it to be about shin length, so I rolled up the material and folded the curtain where I wanted to cut it. After cutting it to my desired length, I used the base stitch on my sewing machine and stitched right across the top of the length of the material. Using this stitch allows me to bunch the fabric at the top evenly so I can get some nice ruffles and movement when it's all put together. Once I basted the top material, I carefully held the thread on each side and pulled the fabric towards the middle of the cloak to give it that cool ruffled effect. I made sure that the material was bunched up enough to where it was the length of my fur piece around my shoulders. Once I had all the ruffles that I wanted, I used a straight stitch to lock them all in place. Finally, I clipped the underside of my fur shoulder piece and sewed it together. I glued some elastic onto each strap and reinforced it by gluing more fabric around the straps where the elastic connects to the leather. Another way you could do this would be to cut your straps in a way where you could buckle them together in the back like a belt. But this method ended up working great too. After I tied 2 elastic straps together, I found it gave me some extra wiggle and stretch room. It's time to bring this cloak to life by weathering it.
Yay, this cloak is so delicious.
Solaire, what are you doing?
Nothing, Mom.
Totally weren't eating my cloak, were you?
I wasn't eating your cloak.
I couldn't find a dragon that would help me weather my cloak, so I used a lighter to burn holes into the bottom of the cloak and in other random places. I really focused along the bottom edge of the cloak where it would be more likely to become worn and dirty. By the way, please be careful while doing this. Fire is dangerous, and do this safely so you don't end up burning anything you shouldn't be burning. After I had all the holes and crispy bits that I wanted, I used some water and soaked the bottom of the cloak. This step makes it easier for the material to pick up paint pigment. Then I went over it with a chip brush and used some brown and black acrylic paint I had on hand. This made the cloak look like it was covered in soot and dirt. I focused on layering paint on the holes and at the bottom of the cloak to make it look like it had been dragged through the dirt. I even dry brushed the top of the cloak to make it look a little bit more dirty and like it's been through lots of cool adventures. And now that I'm all dressed for a medieval adventure, it's time to hit the Renaissance Festival. I had a blast wearing this. I was initially worried that this cloak may feel heavy with all the material I used, but I wore it for 12 hours straight and found it to be super light and comfy. The shirt and trousers were thrift store finds that I got for under $10 total, and I made slight modifications too. I also made my trusty hammer in about 3 hours using foam, PVC, and faux fur. Whether you're wearing something like this to a Ren fair or to impress your friends at a Game of Thrones watch party, I hope you'll find this cloak easy to make and enjoyable to wear. If you like cosplay, props, or just making cool stuff, subscribe to my channel so you don't miss another video. Also, if you've been working on something or making something, I would love to see what you're doing. Seeing what you guys create really makes my day. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.